Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
She's so uncomplicated. Ethan smiled, and his smile was surprisingly gentle and dreamy. Who? John wondered. They were in a nightclub, but the loud music didn't stop them from talking. Separate rooms with excellent noise insulation were provided for solvent clients. The guys were not just solvent clients, but also regular and very generous with tips. Therefore, this small but very cozy office with panoramic windows and a mirror ceiling was, you could say, assigned to them. So who's the uncomplicated one? Ethan snapped out of his dreamy reverie and for some reason whispered, "Slaga, she is such a..." Listen, I honestly haven't met anyone like her. Her father owns a tire shop, a businessman, a hard worker, and the girl is not spoiled by life at all. I asked her where she likes to vacation. So she told me, you know what she said? You won't believe it. She says that at the cottage father says fishing, and they then from this fish caught, food cooked, fry it, and with boiled potatoes eat and soup still. Liar. John stared at me. You're a fool. She's playing a joke on you, and you believe it. What kind of girl would have fun like that, as if she's already retired? That's ridiculous. No, wait, I see what's going on. Where's their summer house? Did you ask? Maybe in Cyprus, maybe. No. It's just a little tree, 40 miles out of town, inherited from my grandparents. And that's where he and his daddy have their place of power. They go fishing, pick mushrooms, berries. Listen, she can make jam, and she dries mushrooms and pickles them. What a great girl! She says she starts her mornings with exercise and douses herself with cold water to avoid getting sick. No, but have you ever seen such girls? Not in the movies, but for real. Everybody else has a fitness center and a personal trainer and a healthy diet, and she's exercising in cold water. Aha! And fried fish and chips, plus jam. You're looking for exotic, aren't you? John asked me glumly. I don't even want to ask where you found it, but I'll advise you as a friend. Get rid of her before it's too late. You don't know these country girls, and they're clutching, she'll grab you and that's it. You won't realize how married you'll be, and then you won't get divorced. She'll grab everything she can reach, and you'll be left without pants. Oh, come on, don't make me sad. Ethan grinned. You haven't seen her, Clara. She's like a Cinderella, friendly, kind, and good at everything. Her eyes are like this, and all the time she seems to be surprised. I'll order her a coffee and a cake, and she'll have a happy look on her face. At the Moody's, take her hand in the dark, and she is already shining all over. And when I kissed her for the first time, I think she then even the whole night could not sleep. Knave, she's so cute and sweet, you could fall in love with her. Did you fall in love? No. Ethan wrinkled his nose and looked like a hedgehog about to sneeze, but then changed his mind. What kind of love? I've been with so many girls, I don't think I'm capable of falling in love anymore. You remember Thumbelina, don't you? I got bored beforehand. That's 100% me. And the girl? What about the girl? Well, beautiful but funny, but you'll meet another, even prettier, even funnier. If you fall in love with every girl, you won't have enough days in your life. John suddenly winked conspiratorially at his buddy. Listen, doesn't she have a girlfriend? Because you tell me so deliciously, I even thought I might be missing something in life. Jam, for example. You look for it. Ethan said arrogantly and burst out laughing. Come on, don't be so slow. Go to any cheaper club. There are 100 of them per square meter, and all hungry. You'll treat them to a cocktail and take them to your place. John remained silent, and Ethan suddenly felt sickened by his own cynicism. Ethan had been living in a sticky, sticky jam for a month now. It had started out so nice, so funny. Clara, in her colored sundresses, with her long hair and perpetually surprised look, her willingness to admire everything he said, to rejoice at any, even the cheapest gift. Ethan sometimes bought the girl the cheapest chocolates on purpose, just to test her reaction, but she was as happy about them as if she'd been given diamonds. She was so sweetly embarrassed and always asked him to turn off the lights. Every day she wished him a good morning. Yes, everything was so light, funny, plush, like a video clip of a couple in love releasing into the sky, balloons, hearts, and then, holding hands, going to an ice cream parlor. And then it happened, and I had to thrash around, twist and turn, come up with original moves, lie, lie, lie. Lying was the most painful of all. Ethan was more and more confused, with no idea how to get out of the horror that had come over him and pinned him to the ground. The horror looked exactly like the two purple stripes, parallel to each other, on a pregnancy test. It was the test that the idiotic Clara had presented to him by calling and scheduling an urgent appointment. "Come right now, please," she asked. "I have such news. In short, come." "What's wrong?" he asked, surprised. "Have the aliens taken over the planet?" "Ethan, this is not a phone call." "Come quickly. It's very important. I'm waiting for you." The girl didn't bother to explain. Ethan was very worried then. The demand, the urgency. It was something out of Clara's repertoire if she said it was urgent. Intuition, of course, was not dormant. Ethan suddenly remembered how, a couple weeks ago, he and Clara had decided to go out of town to a wild beach and had had a wonderful time there until late in the evening. They didn't even want to leave, and she fell in love with the place and kept repeating, "I will live here. I like it here so much that I want to stay here forever." Ethan understood her, he wanted to, but he wanted it to be like this. Warm but not hot weather, the water glistening, and for Clara to walk around in her bathing suit, and for them to be as old as they are today, 18 and 19. He would build a shawl then, right here on top of the hill, and in the evenings they would burn fires and drink cheap sweet wine. A picture to remember. He said out loud, "What is it?" "I want to say that I will remember this day and keep it in detail, like a photograph of you and me living here all our lives and not growing old for a minute. It's like a snapshot, only not with a camera, just with your eyes." He kept in his memory this picture of eternal summer and eternal happiness. However, there were no pharmacies nearby, but Ethan somehow hoped that it would be lucky. And if he hoped in vain, oh, not for good. All this urgency. Oh, not good. What if the wild beach left them a mark in the form off? What the hell is this? Maybe Clara just saw a cockroach, and now he's afraid to move, or a mouse. He didn't notice how he accelerated his steps towards the girl's house. Whatever happened there, it was better to find out as soon as possible, and not to be tormented by doubts. And maybe it would turn out that there was nothing to worry about. Maybe the girl just needs some help. You know, like move a couch. A couch would be nice. He ran up the stairs to find out, finally, what was the cause of Clara's anxiety. Here's already her floor. Ethan didn't even have time to ring the doorbell. But Slaga jumped out into the entryway in a bathrobe, clutching in her fist a strip of paper with 2 dashes on it. Ethan tried hard not to think about where the test had been before it was picked up. "Look, look!" The girl shrieked, smiling so contentedly that Ethan immediately wanted to run away. Of course, Clara, with her usual stupidity, didn't notice anything and kept shoving the object of her idiotic pride under his nose. Well, what to do now? I wonder what kind of reaction she expects. That he, too, would jump with delight, pick her up in his arms and start twirling her around? Or fall to his knees and start kissing her still flat belly like in the movies? Yeah, a bad movie. Ethan, what's wrong with you? Is that your face? You're not happy. She finally figured it out. I should be happy. But are you happy? It's our baby, yours and mine. Isn't it great? Yours is. Ethan blurted out the first thing that came to his mind. But as for me, that's a moot point. He knew he was saying a nasty, insulting thing. He knew that Clara didn't deserve them, but he was saying them, and now, at this very moment, he wanted them to be true. How do I know? Maybe I wasn't your only one. You didn't swear fidelity to me, did you? Maybe you were seeing someone else at the same time. I wouldn't be surprised at all. How? How? Why? Because. Do you have proof that you didn't go out with someone else, that you only went out with me? No? Well, I don't have any proof either. So why should I believe you? The girl's huge eyes instantly filled with tears. Ethan, look, there's 2 stripes, that means. I know what it means without you telling me. It's okay, it happens. But what does that have to do with me? Who else? Ethan, what's wrong with you? I'm not with anyone else. Here's a test, check it out. Don't give me that test. I've seen it. I'm not interested in what it says, Ethan. He asked, squeamishly pulling away. Well, where? Show me. Clara slammed her eyes shut resentfully. A crystal tear ran down her rounded cheek, her eyes large, open, amber-colored. At first, they seemed childishly enthusiastic and naive. Where had it all gone? It was as if the enchantment had dissipated in an instant, leaving only the surprise of his own blindness. Where was he looking before? Naivety, delight. Now he realized it was not enthusiasm, but elementary stupidity. Too bad it was too late for him. I had no one else. The girl whispered in a trembling voice. You know you haven't. How would I know that? Ethan started up. Do you think I've been following you? I mean, who else could have been involved? I'm just saying. You go to the doctor for an abortion. If there's anything there, you have to pay. Fine, I'll pay. But then we break up because I don't want to do it again. Especially from a girl I've never been sure of. You'll get pregnant again, and then you'll want to pin it on me. No way. To the doctor, she. There was a voice from behind the door. She's going to register, to observe the pregnancy. Who the hell is that? The boy was confused. The door of the apartment opened, and Ethan saw a man in old sweatpants on the doorstep. Apparently, this character was the future grandfather of the 2 stripes and the daddy of the dopey, blissful one. In addition to the pants, the man was dressed in a shedding t-shirt, which favorably emphasized his emerging potbelly. His vast baldness was a strange contrast to his thick, dark mustache. His gaze was ferocious, a real monster. Good evening, young man. The monster said hello politely and without any transition, grabbed Ethan by the shirt on his chest and pulled him closer. It's going to kill him. The boy thought and squeezed his eyes shut just in case. Definitely will. My name is Christopher. The monster growled, breathing in the guy's face. His breath smelled of fish and something else alcoholic. Beer, probably. Ethan, the boy wheezed. The shirt on his chest pulled taut and rattled threateningly. Nice to meet you, continued the monster who called himself Christopher, continuing the conversation. As you may have already guessed, I am Clara's father. Before you say anything in your defense, I feel it is my duty to inform you that I will not tolerate rudeness. This almost refined politeness, combined with the creepy paw rubbing his shirt and the horrifying face in close proximity to Ethan's face, had a paralyzing effect. The guy didn't dare open his eyes, and he didn't even think about trying to break free. "If you hurt her, you hurt me, and it's dangerous to hurt me," growled the monster. "And now a second warning. You will marry my daughter, because my grandson must be born in a legal marriage. Maybe you have not yet had time to propose marriage, Clara, as befits a decent man. Well, now is the time to do it now. That's what you were going to do, like a real man, not a trashy little bastard, right? Am I right? Am I right?" With each new phrase, the monster shook the guy vigorously. "You're right. Yes, yes, of course. That's a smart boy." Christopher, unclasping at last his mighty hand, carefully smoothed Ethan's shirt and patting him paternally on the cheek. "Because if you had been a shameless scoundrel, capable of abandoning a pregnant woman, I would have made a cutlet of you and fed you to my dog. And now I dare not disturb you anymore." The monster smiled and disappeared behind the door. Ethan slid along the wall and sat down on the floor. "Is your father crazy?" he asked. "Or does he always act like that? Or only with guests?" The girl glanced at the door and pressed her finger to her lips. "Speak quietly." "Daddy's hearing is phenomenal. He can hear everything through 3 doors. You'd better be quiet. We're getting married then." Ethan mumbled and covered his face with his hands. It's a nightmare. It was impossible to believe what was happening. The next day, Christopher personally drove the couple to the marriage ceremony and made sure that the applications were written in the proper form and accepted as they should be. At the same time, he kept glancing at Ethan as if he expected the groom to run away or act crazy. "Clara said you're not a poor guy. He said it after the applications were filed. Of course, it's good to have something to live on while my wife is at home with the baby. Well, how are you doing? What do you do for a living?" "Where? Nothing," mumbled the guy. "Work is bad now. They pay me a trifle everywhere." Christopher nodded. "That's true. But no one ever got rich on a paycheck like that. You should try to organize something yourself." "All right, it's solvable. But what do you live on?" "My parents give me a little. They've got." "Well, I see. I see. Don't go on." The future father-in-law waved away. "Well, Clara?" He looked at his daughter. "Congratulations. You found yourself a lazy man with an ego and a slacker. And this daughter," Christopher unceremoniously pointed his finger at Ethan. "This one, look closely, is your future husband. What do you think of that?" Well, the girl lowered her eyes. "Things are different now, aren't they?" "Right, Ethan. He's a family man now. I think he'll be able to work and provide for me and the baby." "You think so?" Dad grinned. "Well, think. It's my business, but if you want to know what I think, I'll tell you this. This major doesn't like to work and doesn't know how to work. If he could do something, he wouldn't be on his parents' back. And if he didn't know how to do something, but he loved it, he'd be trying to learn something. But that was before, Daddy, and now. He doesn't love you either." Christopher went on. "And his father is, I apologize, like a pig, a snow-white swan." "Come on, Dad. Shut up. You asked for my opinion, so stay out of my way. And here's my advice to you, my daughter. Send him away. Right after the baby's born, he's no use to you and won't be. This way you'll have a child in marriage, and you'll get rid of the stone around your neck. Girl, you're beautiful, you're smart. You'll find yourself a nice guy with a head and a heart. And this one, He glanced contemptuously at Ethan. He'll never be a man again. He's all right on the face, handsome, but there's nothing good about him except his face. The face changes with time. Ethan gritted his teeth. He's in trouble. Now this car mechanic with 3 grades of education is going to sit there and insult him. Dad, don't, asked Clara, pointing her eyes at the groom. It's unpleasant for him. And in general, of course, you have a lot of life experience, but maybe you're wrong. But it's unlikely. Can I, said Ethan, who up to this moment had been gloomily silent, stop insulting me? I'm your daughter's fiancé and the father of your grandson. Who gave you the right to behave like this? Hiya, nobody yet. If you want to prove your worth, get a job. Think about a place to live. And by the way, start taking care of your fiancé. She's pregnant. She needs rest, proper nutrition, light emotions. The doctor said Clara needs fruit and vitamins. Go and think about it and get her that. For starters, the next day, Ethan was walking through the yard of his fiancé's house and could not answer himself the question, what was he doing here? A heavy bag of fruit and vitamins for Clara was weighing down his arm. Humanitarian aid for pregnant fools and very heavy. Christopher opened the door for him himself and held out his hand for the bag. Did you bring fruit? Good for you, come on. Clara is not at home now. I sent her to the cottage in the morning. Let her get some fresh air. She'll be back on Thursday. I'll tell her you came by. Ethan was not invited to come in, and he remained standing, staring dumbfoundedly at the cheap sodden door. Why am I here? Again he asked himself, but there was no definite answer to that question. Most likely because not to come to leave Clara, no matter how stupid she was, would be to agree with the characterization that this disgusting type, her father, had given him. And also because he was scared. This really Christopher, a man without a tower, such a man will unscrew his head and then surrender to the authorities, but only unscrewed, it is no longer screwed back in place. Screw it all and skip town right now. And then what? Daddy has long ago and quite unambiguously made it clear to his children that either after receiving a certificate of higher education, they stay to work at his company, or they cannot count on the inheritance and at least some financial support. This means that to run away is like agreeing to a miserable existence, to be lost on the streets, and to fend for themselves. Ethan shakes his head, as if he hoped to shake her out of her fears and any other unnecessary thoughts. I had to think of some way out of this, and as soon as possible. But, as it turned out, no reasonable ideas appeared, and it was clear that he could not do without his sister's advice. Clara stood at the window, watching Ethan nervously pacing the sidewalk in front of the house, probably thinking about something, and certainly nervous. He sent you some fruit. My father shouted from the room. I left it on the table in the kitchen. And why did you deceive him that I'm at the cottage? Asked the girl. I heard. Christopher stood on the threshold of the room, leaned his shoulder against the jamb, and looked intently, very seriously at his daughter. I wanted to buy you some time, he said, for you to think calmly whether you want him or not. You see what he's like. He's neither fish nor flesh. A slug. Then why did you ask him to marry you? I pressured him, of course. I couldn't listen to him go on and on about you. But tell me something. Do you really want to marry him, that lazy bum? A child without a husband isn't very nice, but if you look at it another way, maybe it's better to have no husband than that dry fruit of yours. I love him, I confessed. You love him, of course. It's understandable. While you were dating, hugging, kissing, all was well with you. But it's the same for everyone, until there are no responsibilities, no children. He's a handsome guy, looking in love, holding your hand, talking nicely. Love, carrots, all those beautiful things. And how did things get complicated? So where did it go, his love? I heard everything. He didn't tell you, Clara. Even though we didn't plan it, we'll get through it and I'll be with you, no matter what you decide, did he? He didn't, did he? No. He started talking about how the baby might not be his and other nasty stuff that made me want to throw up. And I'm not squeamish. I was. So let me ask you a different question. Will you have something to love him for when the passion passes? And it will pass. Can you believe me? There will remain the character of a man, his deeds, for what you can respect. You can despise, you can love, and you can hate. Will there be something to love him for then? Clara lowered her head and bit her lip. Daddy, she said after a short silence. I don't know now. Ethan was the prince from the TV series. Tall, slender, dark-eyed in his movements, the lightness of a predator and the fluidity of water flowing from one position to another as naturally, easily, beautifully as if a river were flowing. And his speech was like a river, as smooth, unhurried, and sometimes like a noisy stream. Clara thought he must smell of water. Fresh, clean, fresh from the spring, but it was the opposite. When she hugged Ethan, she could always smell the woods, resin and herbs and something else, but it was so intoxicating that it seemed impossible to break the embrace. To stand like this, pressed together, and breathe in the smell of my beloved. Inhale it and do not stop, do not get distracted. You're a river, and it smells like a real forest. She used to say, why a river? I don't know. They say I'm a river, but I'm not. But you didn't. You're like a river. You've come into my life and filled it all with you. So you're a river? No, I'm just yours. How many of these conversations have they had? How many unbreakable embraces? How can you forget that now? And now Ethan was nothing like his recent self. Where did he get all this insolence, meanness, anger? The way he kept saying he didn't know if she'd been faithful to him or if she'd gone out with others, as if she could look at others. She didn't notice anyone but him. Clara still loved him, but realized more and more clearly she loved her memories of Ethan and the real him she didn't know at all. She doesn't want to know. I don't want to be a daddy. I don't want to be a daddy. Ethan kept repeating himself. With each word, he banged his head against the soft back of the chair. Nancy was quietly looking at her fresh manicure and didn't seem to notice what was happening. She was silently worrying about when her brother would finally calm down enough to talk to her. Ethan groaned for a few more minutes, then lifted his head. Why don't you say something? He asked in a perfectly normal voice. Don't you see your brother's life is a disaster? You could have said something, consoled him, given him some advice. Nancy shrugged her shoulders. Ethan, you're a fool. Aphoristically, she said. It's pretty clear, he said. What do we do now? That gastropub has a crazy daddy. He'll kill me, and he won't regret it. You. Is that how you talk about the girl you love? I never loved her. Ethan moaned. She's cute, she's pretty, and I got carried away for a while. But what kind of love? You have to pay for pleasure. Nancy said admonishingly. As for everything else, however, for stupidity, for ignorance, for beauty and talent. But pleasure usually costs more than anything else. Thank you for the informative lecture. The brother bowed. But what should I do, huh? So I don't have to go back to it. The sister began slowly, looking up at the ceiling. I warned you that your games in bad neighborhoods to the suburbs and affairs in bedroom communities will not lead to good. But since you didn't listen to me, and you, She pointed her finger at her brother. "You didn't. Now we need to find out what options we have to solve the problem. The first option is to offer the girl money for an abortion and make sure she gets proper care and maintenance. Dad, tell her that horror, spontaneous miscarriage, but you will cope. You can overcome this grief together, supporting each other." "You don't know that fool, Clara," Ethan said glumly. "There's no way she's going to go along with this. People like her have only one goal in this life, to have a bunch of children like a pig and sit among them contentedly while a man works for her and all this litter. So this option is out," Nancy stated nonchalantly. "Let's move on to the second option. It's simpler, but also more complicated. Say it. Leave everything as it is and raise the child together." Wow. One option is better than the other. Do you have any other interesting ideas? A third option? I haven't thought of a third one yet. Maybe I should just drop off the radar, sorely suggested the guy. Why? It's quite possible. Just change your phone number, leave, and that's it. There'd be no place for us to cross paths with her then. He grinned. We'll be on different paths. And her dad's a crazy tire man. He won't be able to find me. Nancy shook her head. No, my dear brother, that won't do. I won't say the platitudes about the fact that if you do, you'll lose your father's financial support in no time. That's half the trouble, if you ask me. Money can be earned. The trouble is, you're incapable of taking care of yourself. And do you know why? And why is that? Asked my brother. Because the created problems need to be solved, and you just want to merge quietly, disappear. Yes, almost all men do that. Ethan was indignant. You'd think. And that's why they almost all lie as they have to. The girl said, they work for miserable wages, live in shanty towns, and in the evenings drink the cheap liquor they're sold under the guise of beer. That's pretty much all of yours. You want to be like that. What's that got to do with it? It's got everything to do with it. Nancy sighed. That it's not those who run away from problems who live well, but those who aren't afraid to face them. Those who solve them. You have a problem, and you want to run away from it. In that case, how long after you get your inheritance will you be on the street? If, of course, you get it at all, and not crawl back under your parents' wing after you've been fired for stupidity from your supermarket cashier position? Inheritance. Ethan grumbled. What's there to talk about now? Dad's health is good. That's fine. It seems to be as far away from the inheritance as the moon. But it'll come sooner or later. And frankly, I wouldn't want you to give up your share and then settle down to support me, said the sister. There was so much cold certainty in her tone that Ethan felt uneasy. Nancy was, unlike her brother, the pride of the family, a strategist's mindset, independence, the ability to make quick decisions and put them into action, and a persistence so persistent that God forbid she should dream of it. A robot, not a woman. Ethan joked, but deep down he admired his sister. That's why he ran to her for advice whenever he had the slightest difficulty. Usually she managed, thinking quickly, assessing the situation correctly, and giving excellent advice. But today, it seemed that even Nancy could not give him any advice, but she spurred his own imagination. You're a good girl, sister, he said and clapped his hands together. I think I've figured out what to do. The beer was disgustingly diluted. Ethan forced himself to swallow what was already in his mouth, but he set the mug aside. The bulky man sitting across from him was also his future father-in-law. He looked at the guy with bewilderment. Do not like it, he asked. You'll have to excuse me, Christopher, replied Ethan. You know, I'm not very good with beer. But I couldn't explain to this fat an aging man that beer was at least something you could try at Oktoberfest before it became too popular. Well, or at least in the Czech Republic. And what you can buy for pennies at the supermarket is not beer. It's rat poison. Suit yourself. He smiled. But I like to drink beer in the evening at work. You know, you get tired, so here it is. He lifted the bottle. Relaxes me, relieves stress, and puts me in a positive frame of mind. Ethan nodded politely. That's what my father says. Christopher immediately seized on the mention. He's a good man, your father, a hard worker. By the way, it's about time we got to know each other. What do you think? Because look, you and Clara are about to get married. You'll soon become parents, and we haven't even seen the matchmakers yet. It's not right. Yes? Ethan mumbled uncertainly. But, you know, we have such a family, such a... Well, family is family. The man interrupted him. Whatever they are, they're our own. You just bring them to us, and we'll make friends. Ethan was silent. You're in trouble, you idiot. You're in trouble. He should have listened to his sister, because she'd always told him to socialize with people in his own circle. And she was right on the money, you bastard. Well, what? The son of an entrepreneur. For a minute, a man with 2 higher education, who for fun is studying a 5th foreign language, may have in common with the daughter of the owner some lousy tire shop. He's just a common bastard anyway, and his daughter is the same, even if she is beautiful. Fool. Ethan berated himself for the umpteenth time this evening. If you want a taste of tart exoticism, you can have it. You know he lied, following a momentary burst of inspiration. I don't want you to meet my parents because I'm embarrassed, because they're, well, how should I put it, unusual people. Do they drink? Christopher raised his eyebrows. So, yeah, sure, it's a scary thing. But you can talk to them. If they want to quit, so I will organize treatment. I have a brother in New York just from addiction. He's a great doctor. He's got a whole clinic. Sure, yeah, I'll have to talk to them about it. Maybe they'll agree. That would be very good. It'll be fine, Ethan, as long as they want to live sober. The boy's got his head down. I'd like to postpone your acquaintance after all, especially since Clara's pregnant. Why should she go to all this trouble? She doesn't. But will they even come to the wedding? I guess they said they'd try, but they didn't make any firm promises. So we'll meet them in a week. Christopher shouted contentedly and took another big sip of his disgusting beer. The wedding was bearing down on Ethan at the speed of sound, but now he was looking forward to it. Each new day brought the lad closer to the coveted day, the release. The plan he had devised was simple and brilliantly thought out. They, that is, both Clara and her crazy father should be disappointed in me. He informed his sister. They should realize that it's better to be a single mother than to be married to a jerk like me. With tireless energy, he invented new ways to convince the bride, especially the future father-in-law, of his repulsive nature. When do you think you'll get a job? Christopher snapped at him. Your bride is not an elephant. 2 years pregnant will not walk. But I'm looking for something. Ethan turned around. I haven't found anything yet. All right, you'll come to my tire shop. I'll teach you everything myself. I'll pay you well. If you work well, you'll start earning well. This conversation was repeated with depressing regularity. And in the end, Ethan saw a suitable occasion to demonstrate once again his unsuitability for family life. The only thing left to do was to summon up the courage. I don't want to work. Bluntly, he declared one day to Clara and Christopher. Why should I? My parents still give me money, and as soon as the child is born, I will also get an allowance from the state. How much did Clara find out? But no matter how much it is, it's still money. And when the baby grows up? Asked the girl anxiously, looking at the groom. The allowance will end, and the older the child, the more money is needed for him. The allowance will run out, but Clara, the parents won't, Ethan assured her. And when it ends and but so then there will be an inheritance, and not a small one. By the way, I've already decided what we'll spend it on. We'll buy a big house and rent it out. It's for passive income. You do nothing and the money drips. It's beautiful. And you and I will go to Thailand. Life is very cheap there. We'll have enough rent money for 2 people. Why 2? What about the baby? Or don't you plan to take him with you? Oh, Clara, Ethan said reproachfully, you can't just think of yourself. Where do you want to take the baby? To Thailand? No, you can't even ask me that. Of course, you shouldn't take the child with you because of the climate change, insects, kindergarten, school, medicine. In short, we'll leave him here. Let Grandma and Grandpa take care of him, and we'll go there to rest. We can come and visit once in a while. But wait, Ethan. Why? Christopher stepped in. I think it's a great plan. We can implement it. At least I'll make a man out of my grandson. Daddy will not teach him anything good. Right, Clara? You're starting again. Offended, Ethan said, and was silent for a long time. That's how you try to offend me, to humiliate me. And for what? Because I want to arrange everything so that Clara and the child would be happy. It's better to separate mother and child. Ethan was silent, but in his heart he felt that he had just won a small but important victory. Let them continue to think that he was a foolish, worthless, twitchy idiot from whom nothing could be expected. The next day he showed up at his fiancée's house drunk and diligently made noise in the entryway, until Christopher peeked out of the apartment and threatened to call the police. Oh, come on, Dad. Ethan swung the bottle in a cartoonish fashion. Some of the wine spilled over his head and ran down his face. Ethan wiped away the alcohol and licked his palms. Christopher looked at him in disgust, which was exactly what the groom's script called for. Oh, he said, smiling stupidly. Can I call you Dad? Dad? Dad is just right. It's you. Go home, Christopher advised him. Go before I turn you in to the police. So how do you go home? Ethan was indignant. I'm here to see my sweetheart. Yes, Clara, yes, my little darling. Come here, come here. He pinched his bride's cheek. I can't do anything without my Clara. I can't do anything without her, Daddy. I can't eat, I can't sleep, and I can't see you, said Christopher. Get out, and don't you dare breathe your booze on my daughter. You'll come back when you're sober. Having waited a few more days after the drinking performance, Ethan again came to the guests and demanded a wedding present from his future father-in-law. So you don't have to worry about what to get us. You know how they give us all kinds of awful junk, and then people agonize, they don't know where to put these gifts. So let's make a wish list, like some people do. Do what? Well, wish list means wish list. The guests will familiarize themselves with it, and then everyone will decide what to give from this list, and there are only the necessary things. I think you'll give us an apartment, he said, but I'm telling you right away, we need a 2-room apartment, a child. And what will your parents give? Christopher grinned. Maybe a summer house? You put it on your wish list. The child will need fresh air and vitamins. By the way, I've already looked at a nice cottage near the city. All communications are already pulled up, sewerage, water, electricity. There is near a pine forest, very clean air, and there is a garden, so we won't have to grow apples ourselves. Daddy? Clara laughed, but Ethan stopped her with a gesture. My parents will support us," he said habitually, adding a note of resentment to his voice. "Isn't that enough for you?" Christopher sighed and shook his head. "Unfortunately, yes. If they had raised you to be a man, I'd be much more grateful, honestly." "Clara," he turned to his daughter, "why do you need such a husband? Maybe you'll change your mind while there's still time." "Daddy," the girl was confused. "You wanted to have a child in marriage, didn't you?" "I did." Dad didn't disagree. "But look at him, that father. Then such a father, maybe it's better." "Clara," Ethan raised his head in offense. "Do you see what's going on here? Your father wants to separate us. Are you just going to keep quiet? Let the child grow up without a father? Because you see, Christopher, you don't like me, do you?" Clara smiled and waved her hands. "Honestly, Ethan, it seems to me that you yourself want us to break up. I just don't understand why you won't say it openly. Because your crazy dad would cut me to ribbons." Ethan thought, but he only said one thing out loud. "Don't be silly, the wedding's in a week." His sister was skeptical of Ethan's plan. It was her nature to be skeptical, she said, and she was probably right. But Ethan still believed in his own strength. Just a little more to go, just another week. They're already at their limit, barely hanging on. Just a little more patience, and the wedding day's in a week. My sister reminded me. Exactly. Ethan exclaimed happily. Exactly. That's just about the day of the wedding. And that's when I'm going to have my main gig, after which, oh, Nancy, I'm going to have such a party to celebrate my release. We'll go to the Canaries. We'll get some people together, rent a beach and party from morning till night till the ambulances come for us. Sister only gave me a sharp shoulder. "Let's see if your idea doesn't fail," she snorted. "Don't say gop until you've jumped over it." "I've already jumped over, my dear sister." "I have." Ethan laughed and hugged Nancy tightly. Clara was pensively going through the countless ruffles on her wedding dress, the dress itself hanging on its hinges on the closet door. Christopher looked into his daughter's room and sat down beside her. "It's beautiful," he said, looking at the wedding dress. "The ribbons, the lace. I never understood these wedding dresses. After all, for one day it is, and the wedding is off and in the closet. But beautiful." "Yes, beautiful." Clara let go of the caressing fabric from her fingers and turned to her father. "This is not what I dreamed of, Dad. Not at all. And now I'm looking at this dress and thinking, who am I going to wear it for? Ethan?" The man felt that now the girl was ready to tell him something important, special, and kept silent, afraid to scare her mood. "You know, when I met Ethan," she said slowly, "I felt like I'd met some kind of fairy prince, and not just because he was handsome. He took such good care of me, drove me to school, picked me up after class, fed me at restaurants. Then we went out, went to the movies." "Every day?" Dad asked. "Every day. And it seemed to me that it was like going to the movies. And nothing about it made you suspicious." "I did. It was only a couple of weeks later that I suddenly thought, doesn't he have any business of his own? I mean, we were together all the time. From morning till night. It's like he's got no school, no job, nothing. Nothing but fun." I asked him, and he looked at me so strangely and said, "I can afford to rest." But here he is all resting and resting. Father snorted. "And does not get bored." "Yes, and when I found out I was pregnant, I thought that now everything would change for sure. Ethan will realize that now he can't go out like he used to, thinking only about pleasures. That a family, a child will be here soon, and that's a responsibility. You have to think about the future. But the further I go, the more I realize that he's not going to think about anything. You see, the way he acts, It's like he's getting cocky on purpose. Christopher didn't know what to say. And what can you say? Clara saw and said it all herself. You can still replay everything, he said softly. Just tell that bum there's no wedding. It's my fault, too. When I found out about it, I was furious. I thought I'd do anything, and the child would be born in marriage, and then the grass would grow back. But you know how they treated it in my time. It was considered a disgrace. That's why I thought out of habit, and then I looked around and everything had changed. What's the point? Now many women give birth to children, but they're in no hurry to get married. What can you do if you're not lucky enough to have a father? We'll raise the kid, work, bring him up. You'll meet a good guy. And this one, what's he worth to you? He's a fool. If only I'd realized who he was before. Sadly, smiled Clara. And now I feel like I have to go all the way. And I keep thinking, well, at least he said that there will be no wedding, even if he refused to marry. Why wait for him to say that? My father was surprised. Can you do it yourself or not? But do you want to? I'll tell him, and I'll throw him down the stairs with my great pleasure, eh? The wedding is the day after tomorrow, Dad, reminded my daughter. Everything is ready, money spent, invitations, restaurant. How can I cancel it all? How then to look people in the eyes? Give it up. Christopher laughed. Who cares? Changed her mind and that's it. If you don't like it, the door's over there. No, you can't do that. Can you marry a jerk? I made a mistake. What can I do? So I'll have to go all the way, said the daughter. And the father realized that no matter how much he wanted to, he couldn't change her mind. She feels sorry for her. She doesn't want to marry that Ethan of hers. She's embarrassed in front of others, but in front of herself, in front of her child. Ethan was getting ready for the wedding. He'd been shopping all day, but he hadn't found anything suitable. What kind of discrimination is this? Why aren't there stores for people who like tattered clothes? What do fashion designers care about? Are they creating some kind of fashion collection? One uglier, one uglier. And where, you may ask, are the fashion collections for the homeless, where in the end, you can get at least a homeless man's masquerade costume? Shopping had worn him out. Ethan was about to fall into despair, but then a brilliant idea struck him. Why look for special clothes? You could just make your own. A pity, of course, but what not to sacrifice for a great cause? All it takes is a little dirt. That's it. Ethan flew home on wings. Once home, he got down to business with all the imagination he could muster. First, he wet the soles of his sneakers with water and carefully walked in them over his sweater and jeans, which he spread out on the floor. The prints were quite convincing, but they weren't the only thing he could do. He found some pistachio ice cream in the fridge and smeared it on his jeans and sweater. Then Ethan poured some instant coffee into a jar and poured it on his sweater. His jeans got a few ketchup stains and a couple of greasy butter stains. Only the finishing touches remained. Ethan, armed with a pair of scissors, carefully cut the sweater along the seam and ripped off the sleeve. Then he stretched the sweater in all directions to add bagginess and was satisfied with his creation. The elegant summer sweater was now unrecognizable. The jeans were a different story. Despite the ketchup, ice cream, and butter, the stupid pants still didn't look bad enough. Ethan stomped around in his sneakers just in case, cut off the back pocket, leaving it dangling on a couple of verses, and in addition, poured a glass of water on one pant leg and poured instant coffee right on the wet spot, then began laboriously rubbing the rich coffee powder right into the fabric. It would be more expressive that way. It really did fix things. Now the pants looked just right. They looked like they'd been pulled out of a dumpster. Ethan marveled aloud, taking another critical look at his clothes. His wedding outfit was ready. Clara sat in the kitchen, melancholy, stirring the sugar in her cup. The wedding dress hung in its former place. The girl had glanced at it without interest in the morning and passed it by. "You're not dressed yet," surprised Christopher. He saw that his daughter was sitting in her pajamas, her hair gathered in a shaggy bundle, and did not even try to look at the clock. He himself had already managed to wake up, eat breakfast, and take a shower. Now he only had to get dressed and could go to marry his daughter. But only the daughter was not in a hurry. Soon the groom will come, and you are unwashed, sitting in your pajamas. How can you do that? What's the matter with you, Clara? Don't you feel well? "I don't want to get married, Papa," she said, without any expression. "I don't. To Ethan, no, you shouldn't marry a man like that. I only realized last night you can't. It would be a tragedy. It'd be misery, and I've got a baby to think about. Dad, can we still call it off? Isn't it too late? But you found time to change your mind." The father smiled and patted the girl's hair. "Right on the day of the wedding. Well, better late than never. Your fool is coming, and you'll tell him. Or do you want me to tell him?" "No, Dad, don't. I'll tell him myself. I'll decide. I'll tell him myself." Clara finally looked up at her father with a tired look. "I haven't slept all night." He understood. "Look at the circles under your eyes. Oh, youth, youth? Don't worry, my child," he said quietly. "You've made the right decision." Ethan looked at himself in the mirror again with pleasure. Perfect. He had thought of everything, or almost everything. No, the watch had to come off. He smeared a little olive oil on his hair to make it stick together, then sprinkled it with flour. It was perfectly messy and even somewhat dusty, and the stubble on his face, which he hadn't gotten rid of in 2 days, had grown back sloppily. It remained to pay attention to his nails. The question of manicure was solved very simply. Ethan went outside and sat down on the nearest lawn, digging into the ground for a while. His sneakers, which he had also covered with earth, looked a little more civilized than necessary, and the guy got rid of the laces. Now everything was perfect. It was time to go after the bride. Just before Clara's house, Ethan stopped and took a few deep breaths and exhaled. And so the final act of the play Escape from Family Life began. An important key moment in his plan. Now it is necessary to play. Well, play brightly and even, probably brilliantly. Otherwise tonight he'll find himself a married man. The door was opened for him by Clara herself. "Ethan? What's the matter with you?" "Clara!" He howled and fell to his knees. "Clara, I'm so bad, I'm worse." "Clara, at least beat me. Will it make me feel better?" "Beat me, beat me." Ethan, calm down. "What's this masquerade? She's pregnant, she can't fight. Do you want me to beat you up?" suggested Christopher, who heard Ethan's cries. "Clara, get away. Let me get that slacker." "But Dad," the girl was angry. "You've got time for jokes. The man is so happy." "Without much sympathy," said Christopher. "Maybe he should call an ambulance?" "Clara," howled Ethan. "Clara, my darling girl, my favorite, how are we going to live with you now?" "Daddy's broke. They took everything from us for debts, every last cent. There's no money, no real estate. They took away all the shares. We have nothing left. How are we going to live now? How can I marry you now? My beauty, my Clara, my darling, my darling, my darling. Don't be silent. Tell me something, please." "Oh," the girl sighed. "Thank God, honestly." "What?" Ethan stopped howling in surprise and raised his head. Clara, we can't get married now, can we?" "That's a good thing," she said sincerely. "I'm sorry, Ethan. It's probably my own fault for not saying it sooner. But you realize that. What kind of family are you? You don't want it. Neither do I. What about your dad going broke? Of course he is, but maybe it's not that bad. I'm sure he's not that broke or anything. Don't you want to marry me?" Ethan interrupted her. Well, yes, I don't. And it's a good thing we realized it before we got married. You don't want to marry me, he repeated, shocked. Clara sighed. I don't. I'm sorry. Ethan rose to his feet and looked at the girl resentfully. So I've been freaking out that now we can't get married. And you? Fuck you. Have a nice stay. Ethan rushed down the stairs and thought that this was it. He was running towards his long-awaited freedom, but for some reason he wasn't happy about it. Good girl, said Christopher. Well done, but don't take offense at him. It's just a slip of the tongue. Don't feel bad, baby. You did the right thing. And Ethan jumped out into the street. Without slowing down, ran away from this house, away from Clara, away from her father, away from her child. From this whole nightmare story, for which he was ashamed and for some reason also very offended, as if he had just been betrayed by his most trusted friend. Only now, when everything was behind him, he wanted to ask himself what was so bad about marrying this sweet, loving girl? And would it have been so terrible to become a father? But it was both painful and pointless to think about it now. He had thought for too long that he was being trapped, lured like an animal into a trap, and he had been ready to do anything to break free. And now he wasn't needed, and it turned out that no one was trying to catch him. And the trap was not a trap. It's he himself made up a hell of a lot of things. But what about it now? What's the point? He ran along the asphalt path, and it seemed that this run could go on, if not forever, then for many, many millennia. Ethan never tired and never wanted to stop, ever. Maybe one day he would collapse from fatigue somewhere in Cambodia, but that would be later, when he was exhausted. Only then, and not before. But this time life decided everything for him. A persistent phone call made him stop. What? Ethan bellowed into the receiver. It was Nancy. Her sister, which was absolutely unbelievable, was sobbing at the top of her voice. What are you crying about? I can't understand a word you're saying. Ethan, come at once. Dad was in an accident. He wasn't saved. Can you hear me? Where is he now? Is he in the hospital? Is he in surgery right now? Do you need anything? How about blood? We're the same type. Ethan, Nancy screamed. Dad's dead. He's dead, you know. You're lying, whispered Ethan. You're lying. Aren't you, Nancy? I don't believe you. I don't believe you. I don't believe you. He shouted so loudly that an elderly woman with a dog on a leash, passing by, flinched and stepped away. I don't believe you. Ethan shouted, I don't believe it. You're lying. Nancy, I don't believe you. But he did. Nancy wouldn't joke like that. He knew it. I'm on my way to the lineup, said the sister through her tears. You come too. I can't on my own. Come, I'm waiting for you, Ethan. Will you come? I'll come, he whispered. I'll come right now. The rest of it went on like an endlessly sad movie, and everything Ethan remembered was somehow very vague. No matter how hard Ethan tried, he couldn't remember how he'd gotten a cab and gotten to Nancy. He only remembered calling his sister from the car and trying to find out where he was going and where she was waiting for him. And Nancy was sobbing, mixing up addresses, couldn't remember anything. Then she handed the phone to someone, and the address was found. Ethan found her almost unconscious, sedated. He had to identify his father's body. Ethan had heard that morgues could be cold, but for some reason he felt neither cold nor warm or anything. His father lay covered with a sheet, and when Ethan looked at his face, he saw almost no damage. That pleased him for some reason. Why? He couldn't remember that either. Maybe he just didn't want his father's face to be disfigured. The funeral, another moment of reverence, lingered in his memory. Ethan only remembered that his sister, despite her grief, had been able to pull herself together fairly quickly and had looked solemnly calm at the funeral, standing at his father's coffin. Ethan was not calm, and he was not calm either. He couldn't make himself feel anything, nothing at all, as if all his emotions had been numbed or taken away at once. He kept watching his father's coffin being lowered into the ground, and only one question: the money, the share in the business, the stock. What did it matter now? He thought about whether his father had time to look up at the sky. How often did he go out with friends? How many times had he sat on the ocean and watched the fiery, tropical sun sink in? Had he ever even seen the ocean? Or had he never had time to go on vacation? Somehow, that was all that began to matter. Nothing else. Hey, he looked up. Nancy, did you say something? I couldn't hear. You know, it doesn't matter though. Nancy. Ethan put his hand on his sister's shoulder. I want to give up my share of the inheritance in your favor. What? She was confused. What are you saying? Dad made a will for both of us, and you're saying you want to give up everything. Why? Of the two of us. He smiled. You're the one who's always smarter, more responsible. You're determined, strong. You won't let the cause to which our father devoted his whole life go to the wind. And that's why I want you to have it all. It's only fair and just. You should give it to someone who can hold it together and grow it. Not a schmuck like me. I'd really spend it all in a year and end up with nothing. That'd be okay, but I feel sorry for my dad. He put his whole life into this. There's just one thing I'd like to ask you. It's about Clara. I'm not gonna say anything in front of strangers right now. I'll text you, okay? Nancy covered her eyes for a second, then wiped away a tear with her handkerchief. What about you? She asked quietly. What are you going to do? Ethan? He shrugged. Me, I'll watch the sky, the sunsets. I'm leaving, sis. There's nothing more for me to do in this town. He squeezed the girl's shoulder lightly and walked out into the street. The whole world was waiting for him now. For a brief moment, Ethan wanted to go over to Clara's house to say goodbye to her, but he shouldn't have. He managed to realize something about himself. His father lived for work, and he, Ethan, could stay here and live for the child, but he shouldn't do that. There was nothing he could do. Everything in their family, the truest of naturals, fans. Dad and Nancy are work fans, and Ethan, he's a fan of freedom. And that's probably better than being a fan of parenting. It's bound to break the kid. No better to watch the sunset. He went to the ticket counter and asked for a one-way ticket. Where to? They asked him. Anywhere. Wait for me, though. Anywhere to the ocean, and preferably south. Ethan stepped off the airplane straight into paradise. At least this place looked a lot like it. Tall palm trees waved in the wind, their huge leaves wreathed in opahalas. A wonderful fragrance of flowers wafted in the air. In the distance, but still close, the ocean offered its waters to the sun. The speech of the passers-by was more like the chirping of birds in the morning spring. No luggage, sir? Someone addressed him in passable English. I don't need it. Ethan smiled. The joy, the fullness of life, made him want to sing. Never before in his life had he felt so free. He had a little money, enough to eat twice at any of the local cafes. And beyond that, he was too lazy to think about it. Tomorrow seemed so far away. There would be a day, there would be food. He went forward, not choosing the road. All paths here would sooner or later lead to the ocean. Nancy had no difficulty in finding Clara's address. She had arrived there in the morning to be sure to find her brother's ex-fiancé at home. She looked at her guest with a noticeably rounded belly, a little plump and surprised. "So it is you, Ethan's sister?" she asked at last. "How odd that you don't look like him at all." "Unfortunately, you're right, Clara." Nancy smiled. "Not in appearance, not in character, not in content. But that's not why I came here. I know my brother well, Clara, and I know that Ethan is, well, to put it mildly, not the most responsible person in the world. That's just the way he is, despite his many virtues. But I'm not a stranger to his child, and I'm his own aunt. And if you don't mind—" "Oh, so you want to see the baby?" She was delighted. "Well, of course, whenever you want. What are we talking about?" "I would like not only to see, but also to take care of my nephew." Nancy corrected the girl. "To take over, so to speak, fatherly duties." "Oh, come on, really. No, please listen to me, because it concerns the baby and his future. First of all, you, Clara, will receive a certain amount of money every month for the baby. Don't argue. Ethan, and you may not know this, has renounced his part of the inheritance in my favor. So I've decided that I'm going to dispose of it this way, with part of the money going to child support and the rest for your baby to inherit afterward. Well, in short, when his time comes to receive the inheritance, and until then I will try to see to it that the share of my nephew did not depreciate, but on the contrary, became more. I hope you won't object and argue with me. No. It is obvious to me, for example, that this is the right and just decision. You won't challenge it, will you?" "No, I know you wouldn't." "Nancy, I just wasn't ready. I understand everything you could tell me, that you're not in need, that your father will help you. But I still think it's justice. Don't deny me the chance to right my brother's wrong. I beg you very much. 8 months in the tropics will get to anyone." Ethan knew that now. Personal experience is nothing to be trifled with. Don't confuse tourism with emigration. Tourists fly in for a week's vacation, decide they're in paradise. Here, the sun is always shining and the ocean breaks its waves on the shore, and over the shore carried snow-white seagulls. For some reason, he realized now that it was time to go home. He had a sudden urge to see his sister, to see how she was doing, and to visit Clara. The baby must have been born by now, though Ethan had stopped counting the months long ago. He just lived, not caring about the numbers on the calendar or the days of the week. Sometimes hired for a paltry wage to load bananas for export. Sometimes for a bowl of food, he agreed to wash dishes in local eateries. Sometimes begging. Once even had an affair with a pretty mulatto. But alas, the passion quickly faded because they could not explain themselves to each other. Miracle Girl chattered in some unknown language and did not understand a word of English. But still their love passion allowed Ethan to live without hunger for several weeks. His beauty was a great cook, and there was always food in the house. That marvelous little girl worked in a cafe as a cook. There was a brief period in this strange life of his, full of coincidence, when Ethan got involved with a local gang, and for a while he robbed them and ran away from the police. Though, to be honest, he hadn't had to run away very often. The police here had an easy time turning a blind eye to a lot of things. if, of course, to offer the officers of the law a small cash reward, in general, it was very understandable. There were far more petty thugs than policemen in this banana paradise, and everyone wanted to live in peace. Strangely enough, Ethan liked it. At first, it even seemed that he would not part with his new friends and would eventually become the new Pablo Escobar. He was prophesied to have a great future. At first, it rounded his head and encouraged him. But then Ethan somehow got bored of it all at once. Who does not know, he may think that the life of any romantic from the big road can be anything dangerous, luxurious, frightening, saturated. But Ethan has personally experienced that even in such a profession, there is enough of its routine. One day he just left, quietly, without saying goodbye or throwing a party. His associates probably thought he'd been hit by a bullet in one of the endless street shootouts. It was a common occurrence. No one was looking for Ethan. And now he was standing on the shore, thinking that spring was probably in full swing back home, and for the first time in a long, endless time, he wanted to walk the familiar streets and hear his native speech. Yes, it was time to go back. He said to himself, "It's definitely time now." If he got a job loading bananas again, he could save up for a ticket in a month. Clara was cradling her tiny son and softly singing a lullaby to him. Christopher looked into his daughter's room and looked at two of the dearest and most beloved people in the world, Clara and baby No. Nothing is more precious than this. He thought, for the umpteenth time, there isn't, and there won't be. Life, ongoing, endless from father to daughter, from daughter to grandchild. Clara caught her father's gaze and smiled. He had already fallen asleep. She said in a whisper. Christopher gently took the child in his arms and moved him to the crib. "Do not regret it?" he asked. "For what?" The daughter did not understand. He did not know what to answer. Probably about everything at once. About having a baby. About Ethan not working out. "Nonsense, Dad. Why should I regret it? I had such a wonderful son. And Ethan, what the hell with him? Besides, Father has noticed that you seem to have a new boyfriend." Well, you think I didn't notice the way that Doctor looked at you? I even came to see you off in person when you were discharged. You can't be fooled." Clara laughed. "He's kind of looking after me, and I like him a lot too. Although, of course, it's too early to talk about something serious." "What's the hurry?" "There's no hurry." Christopher agreed. Noah rumbled softly in the crib. Clara came over, but her father gestured for her to stop. "It's all right, I'll do it." He rocked the crib quietly and sang a lullaby to his grandson. Clara looked at her father and her heart warmed. The eternal circle of life from parents to children, from children to grandchildren. And nothing is more important than that nothing. Ethan. Nancy shouted when she saw her brother on the doorstep. He was terribly overgrown, dirty, and dressed in some strange rags. A veritable shambles. But it was her brother. She couldn't help but recognize him. "How I've missed you, little sister, how you've become." Nancy had clearly crossed the threshold between angular girl and young beautiful woman in a matter of months. She had put on a little weight, but it suited her remarkably well. Her cheeks, shoulders, and breasts had plumped up. Her movements had become fluid, and she had dyed her hair a couple of shades darker, just enough to accentuate her fair skin and emphasize her eyes. "How beautiful you've become." Ethan said sincerely, "And you?" "I've been going places no decent person should go. I'll tell you about it someday, or even write a book." Later, his sister interrupted him. "Tell me the most important thing. Did you come back for good? I mean back to a normal human life. You see, I need someone I can trust. No, Nancy, I'm sorry. He even put his hands out in front of him, like he wanted to protect himself from his sister's words. I can't. I wanted to see you, just to be home. It's been a while, but you can't ask for more than that. I wish I could help you, but it's not my thing. Constancy, business, home, I'll only make things worse. I'll run away at the worst possible moment. Then what? But maybe you could at least think about it. Nancy suggested it. It's not like I'm suggesting you chain yourself to the office. We could find you something remotely, even something as simple as that, for starters. And then before you know it, you'll be up to your neck in business. He stopped his sister gently. It's not for everyone. Sis, people like you like it, but it doesn't suit me at all. No offense to me, but suit yourself. Nancy lowered her head with a sigh. I'm sorry, of course, but I suppose it's true. Everyone should do his own thing, what his soul is drawn to. You've grown up, sister. Ethan grinned. So have you? She answered him in the same tone. You haven't changed either. Have you been to see Clara? She's married, but I'm still doing what you asked me to do. She gets good alimony, and when your son gets older. Thank you, Nancy. Ethan meant what he said. He didn't come in. You don't need to bring anything up. She's doing well, and I'm glad of it. She's a wonderful person, very kind and sincere. Everyone would be happy to have such a wife. But not you. My sister smiled sadly. I am not suitable for Constancy. When it catches up with me, I get mad and start doing such a wild thing that I am ashamed of myself. Why should I ruin a good woman's life? Let alone my own child. Does she have a good husband? Yes, a very good husband. He's so protective of her and the baby. They're very happy, both Clara and No. I think in a couple of years they'll give No a brother or sister. Well, that's good. Ethan smiled. And now I'm going to go. It was good to see you by. Will you at least spend the night? My brother smiled nonchalantly. I'm not used to sleeping indoors unless the weather's really bad, and then I get nervous. But today it's warm. It felt good to be out on the city streets at night. Not that Ethan was looking for trouble, but somehow he was lucky. Or maybe it was just that it was peaceful at home compared to the tropical paradise. He'd never once run into a mugger, never had to deal with hooligans looking for someone to beat up. You could say the city at night was favorable to him. The streets were bright with streetlights, storefronts, and car headlights. He liked to sit on a bench and look at the road, cars passing by, everything like in life. Everyone goes his own way, and someone will get to the goal safely, and someone because of daredevillery will get into an accident, but will get off only a fright. And some, I didn't want to think about them. Ethan had become a surprisingly friendly man. I guess his life as a homeless man, his new life, had something to do with it. While he was rich, few people treated him kindly, only his colleagues in the racket, and those were gone as soon as he was a pauper. But now he was helped not to die by strangers, whom he knew had only enough. But kind grandmothers' traders sometimes treated him with apples from their stalls. The cook at the street kiosk once took a long look at Ethan squatting on the curb with his alms bowl, then beckoned him over and gave him a huge, freshly cooked shawarma. And that man in the entryway who wouldn't let the scandalized neighbors kick out in the rain, a vagrant. These are such rays of kindness in a cruel world. You look at it, and you become kinder yourself. And even his seemingly bitchy sister. How happy she was to see his brother. How she persuaded him to stay and return to civilized life, to settle down. But she didn't succeed. Ethan had become too attached to freedom. And freedom he now understood as the complete absence of attachments to addresses, cities, people. Ethan would be howling with longing in a week if he were to go back to his old self. And no money was worth it, no money ever. Today he found a good spot right across the street from the restaurant. People come out of there nice because they're full, and if they're drunk, the catch could be great. True, they were often chased away from fish places, but if you don't worry and try to be inconspicuous, you might get lucky. Without any nostalgia, he looked at the huge, brightly lighted windows and polished steps at the entrance. Was it really only a year ago that he himself had been in places like this every day? Waiters in uniform with polite smiles now seemed to him creatures from another world, and not so long ago he considered them idlers, unworthy of any attention, servants. How are things changing? A few more coins fell into his coin bowl. Ethan raised his head. "Thank you, Ethan." The young woman who had just dropped the change into his piggy bank squatted down and looked straight into the tramp's face. Ethan instinctively pulled back, hiding deeper into his hood. His hair had grown long enough to cover his face, along with his beard. He wouldn't recognize him. He wouldn't even recognize himself now. He couldn't see his old self, no matter how hard he tried. But she did, didn't she? "Ethan? Is that you, Ethan?" Clara kept repeating his name, but he didn't want to respond to it. He hadn't been Ethan for a long time, at least not the Ethan she knew. "You're wrong, girl," he said hoarsely. "That's not my name." "I'm sorry." Clara straightened up and took out a few bills from her purse. "Here you go, please. And sorry again. I thought you reminded me of someone I know." "I'm sorry." He nodded without raising his head. "Clara," someone called out to her. Ethan squinted his eyes. A young man was standing beside a brand new car, opening the doors for his beloved. "I'm coming," she smiled. Her heels clicked on the pavement. The smell of perfume wafted away. She had gone far away, and there was no need to catch up with her. Ethan took some paper money from his piggy bank and hid it under his sweatshirt. "Thank you, Clara." Tonight he would have food and maybe even a little beer. What more could a free man dream of?